Mommy, I'm not hungry. You eat it. Sophie whispered from beneath the diner counter, but Claire Bennett knew her 6-year-old daughter was lying. The little girl's cheeks were warm with fever, her voice thin with exhaustion, and her stomach had already betrayed her twice with a soft, hollow growl. Claire glanced toward the kitchen, then toward Mark Dalton, the night manager, who was arguing with a delivery driver near the front register. The fluorescent lights above Harper Street Diner hummed with the same tired sound they made every night, turning everything pale. The chrome stools, the cracked tile, Claire's worn blue apron, even the rain streaking down the windows outside. She broke the last dinner roll in half and crouched behind the counter. Small bites, sweetheart. Sophie pushed the bread back toward her. You didn't eat. Claire smiled anyway. I ate earlier. Another lie. She had been on her feet for 7 hours and had eaten nothing except 3 French fries from a plate a customer sent back untouched. Sophie hesitated, then took the bread. Claire stood before anyone noticed. At the booth farthest from the door, a man in a faded brown coat watched her over the rim of a coffee cup that had gone cold nearly 20 minutes earlier. He looked homeless. At least, that was what everyone else in the diner had decided. His beard was uneven, his shoes were scuffed, and the knit cap pulled low over his dark hair looked like something bought at a thrift store years ago. 2 customers had already asked Claire why Mark allowed people like that to sit inside without ordering food. Claire had ignored them. What none of them knew was that the man at booth 12 was Ethan Cole, 39 years old, founder and CEO of Cole Hospitality Group, a billionaire whose name appeared on hotels, restaurants, and office towers from Chicago to Miami. Tonight, Ethan owned nothing anyone in that diner could see. No tailored suit, no driver waiting at the curb, no watch worth more than the building's monthly payroll. Just $7 in cash, an old coat purchased that afternoon, and a reason for being there that no one behind the counter would have believed. He had come to observe North Star Diners before signing a massive acquisition deal. He expected outdated equipment, weak management, maybe sloppy service. He did not expect a sick child hiding beneath the counter. And he definitely did not expect her mother to be paying for the food she was sneaking to her. Ethan had noticed the first time Claire entered something into the register, glanced toward Mark, then slipped a small bowl of mashed potatoes below the counter. He assumed she was stealing leftovers. Then he saw her pull 2 crumpled dollar bills from her apron pocket and place them beside the register. 10 minutes later, she did it again with the dinner roll. This time, Ethan watched closely. Claire pressed a button on the screen. A receipt printed. She folded it quickly and tucked it into her apron. Ethan lowered his eyes to his coffee before she could catch him staring. Across the diner, Mark's voice sharpened. Claire, table 6 has been waiting. I'm coming. She grabbed a coffee pot and hurried away, moving with the practiced speed of someone who knew one complaint could cost her hours she desperately needed. Under the counter, Sophie coughed softly into her sleeve. Ethan's fingers tightened around his cup. He had spent most of his adult life believing numbers told the truth. Revenue, labor cost, customer retention, employee turnover. Every problem could be measured if you had enough data. But there was no spreadsheet for a mother pretending she wasn't hungry so her daughter would finish half a dinner roll. Claire returned to the register and checked on Sophie again. Better. A little. Good. Sophie looked toward booth 12. Mommy, that man doesn't have any food. Claire followed her daughter's eyes. Ethan immediately looked down. Maybe he's not hungry, Claire whispered. Sophie frowned with the absolute seriousness only a 6-year-old could manage. Maybe he's pretending too. Claire went still. For one brief second, something passed across her face. Ethan couldn't name it. Recognition, maybe. Or the quiet pain of hearing your own lie reflected back by your child. Then Claire reached into her apron and counted the tips she had earned so far that night. 3 ones. 4 quarters. 2 dimes. Her thumb rested on the money. Sophie watched her. Ethan watched too. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the rain-soaked streets. Claire closed her hand around the bills and walked toward the kitchen. Ethan thought she was finally going to buy something for herself. Instead, she stopped at the register and quietly rang up a bowl of soup. Ethan watched Claire carry the steaming bowl of soup toward booth 12, and for the first time that night, he felt uncomfortable being observed by the very person he had come to observe. She set the bowl in front of him without ceremony, added 2 slices of bread on a small plate, then slid a fresh cup of coffee beside it. Kitchen made too much, she said. Ethan looked at the soup, then at the register across the room where he had just watched her pay for it herself. Did it? Claire met his eyes for half a second. There was exhaustion there, but no embarrassment. It happens. Ethan almost smiled. How much do I owe you? Nothing. I have some cash. Then keep it. She turned toward the counter, but he stopped her with a quiet question. Why? Claire glanced back. Why what? Why give food to someone you do not know? Her eyes moved briefly toward Sophie, still hidden beneath the counter. Because being hungry does not make someone invisible. Then she walked away before he could answer. Ethan stared at the soup. In boardrooms, people usually spoke to him carefully. They watched his face, measured his reactions, adjusted their words when they thought he disagreed. Claire Bennett had no idea who he was, so her kindness had no strategy behind it. That mattered more than he expected. A few hours earlier, Ethan had been 47 floors above downtown Chicago in a glass conference room, while attorneys and executives reviewed the final terms of Cole Hospitality Group's proposed purchase of North Star Diners. The acquisition was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. On paper, North Star looked healthy. Revenue was stable. Customer traffic was improving. Labor costs were unusually low. That last number had bothered him. Then his assistant, Rachel Moore, had placed a thin folder beside his laptop. Employee complaints, she had said. Most were anonymous. Missing hours. Managers changing time records. Workers being discouraged from taking breaks. Employees told they could be fired for taking leftover food home, even when it was scheduled to be thrown away. The corporate response had called the complaints isolated incidents. Ethan had heard that phrase before. His mother had worked as a waitress when he was a child, long before he had enough money to forget what rent week felt like. She used to come home smelling like coffee and fryer oil, counting crumpled bills at the kitchen table. When Ethan was 12, he once asked why she listened more carefully to the dishwasher than the restaurant owner. She had smiled and said, "You learn more about a business from the people cleaning it than the people presenting it." He had never forgotten. So instead of trusting another polished report, Ethan had bought an old coat from a secondhand store, left his driver 3 blocks away, and walked into the North Star location with the highest number of complaints. Now he sat with a bowl of soup bought by a woman who clearly needed every dollar she had. Claire moved quickly between tables, refilling coffee and clearing plates. Every few minutes, she returned to the register and glanced down at Sophie. Ethan noticed something else. Near the counter sat a small notebook, partly hidden beneath a stack of receipts. Whenever Mark disappeared into the kitchen, Claire opened it and wrote down numbers. Ethan could not see everything from his booth, but he caught fragments when she turned the page. Tuesday, 9 hours worked, 7 paid. Thursday, closing shift, 35 minutes removed. Beside each entry was an employee name. Ethan slowly set down his spoon. The missing hours in Rachel's folder were not rumors. Claire had been documenting them herself. At that moment, Mark stepped out of the kitchen and called her name. Claire closed the notebook so quickly that a receipt slipped to the floor. Ethan looked at the paper near his shoe. At the top was another employee name. Beneath it, in Claire's handwriting, were 2 numbers that did not match. Ethan bent down and picked up the fallen receipt before Mark noticed it. He did not read more than he needed to. 1 name, 2 totals, 8.5 hours worked, 7.75 hours paid. A small difference on paper, a large difference when rent was due. He folded the receipt once and placed it on the edge of the table where Claire could see it. She returned a moment later carrying 2 plates, noticed the paper, and froze. Her eyes moved from the receipt to Ethan. "You dropped this," he said quietly. Claire set the plates down at another booth, then came back and slipped the receipt into her apron. "Thank you. You keep careful records." Her expression changed. Not fear exactly, more like caution. "I keep track of my hours. Looks like more than yours." Claire glanced toward the kitchen doors. Mark was still inside. People forget things. Ethan held her gaze. Do managers forget them too? For a second, she said nothing. Then Sophie coughed softly beneath the counter. Claire's attention snapped downward. She crouched, touched the back of her hand to her daughter's forehead, and whispered, "Still warm." Sophie gave her a tired smile. "I am okay. You are always okay until you are not." Claire stood and reached into her apron for her phone. The screen was cracked across one corner. She checked the time, then opened a pharmacy message. Ethan caught only a glimpse, but he saw enough. Prescription ready. Amount due, $42.18. Claire's shoulders lowered almost imperceptibly. Ethan looked at the tip jar near the register. There was not $42 in it. Not even close. "Your daughter needs medicine?" he asked. Claire's head turned sharply. "You were looking at my phone?" "I saw the screen." "Then pretend you did not." Her tone was not rude. It was tired. Private. Ethan nodded once. "Fair enough." Claire reached beneath the counter and handed Sophie a paper cup of water. Sip slowly. Then she turned back toward the dining room. "You should eat your soup before it gets cold." Ethan looked down. He had barely touched it. "What about you?" "I am working." "That was not what I asked." Claire gave him a look that said she had no energy left for strangers asking personal questions. "I am fine." From beneath the counter, Sophie whispered. "She says that when she is hungry too." Claire closed her eyes for half a second. "Sophie." "What?" the girl whispered back. "It is true." Ethan could not help the small smile that appeared. Claire looked embarrassed, but only for a moment. Then a customer waved for coffee, and she hurried away. Ethan watched her move through the diner, carrying a pot that was nearly full while favoring one foot slightly. Her shoes were worn thin at the heels. The sole on the right one had begun to separate near the toe. Still, she smiled at table 4. Refilled table 6. Apologized to a man who had been waiting less than 3 minutes. She made herself smaller for everyone else's comfort. Then the front door opened, letting in a gust of wet August air. A middle-aged man in a gray coat rushed inside, patting his pockets. "My wallet," he said. "I think I left it here." Claire looked toward booth 9. A brown leather wallet rested beneath the table, partly hidden by a chair leg. She crossed the floor and picked it up. The man was still speaking to Mark near the entrance, too far away to see her. Claire opened the wallet only far enough to check the identification. Ethan saw several crisp bills inside. More than enough for Sophie's prescription. More than enough for groceries. Maybe enough to make the next few days less frightening. Claire stared at the money. Her hand tightened around the wallet. Sophie watched from beneath the counter. Ethan did too. For the first time all night, Claire did not move right away. Claire closed the wallet. The pause had lasted only a few seconds, but to Ethan it felt longer because he understood exactly what those bills could mean to her. Medicine. Groceries. Maybe the electric bill. Maybe one night, without calculating which necessity could wait. Claire looked towards Sophie beneath the counter, then toward the man in the gray coat, still searching near the entrance. She walked straight to him. "Sir." The man turned. Claire held out the wallet. "You left this under booth 9. Relief washed over his face. "Oh, thank God. I thought I lost it outside." He opened it immediately and checked inside. Claire said nothing. Ethan watched the man count the cash before he seemed to remember she was standing there. "Everything is here." "Good." Claire started to turn away. The man pulled out a $20 bill. "Take this." Claire shook her head. "You do not have to. Please. You saved me a lot of trouble." Her eyes flickered toward the bill. For the first time, Ethan saw how hard saying no actually was. "Keep it," she said. "Just do the same for somebody else." The man hesitated, then tucked the money away. "You are a good person." Claire gave a small smile. "I am just tired." When she returned behind the counter, Sophie looked up at her. Was there money in it? Claire crouched. "Yes. A lot. Enough." Sophie thought about that. "We need money." Claire brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "Needing something does not make it ours." Ethan felt the words settle somewhere deeper than he expected. He had heard versions of that idea in speeches, charity galas, leadership books. None of them had sounded like this. None had come from a woman with $42.18 between her child and medicine. Claire stood and reached for the coffee pot again. Mark appeared from the kitchen at the same moment. "What was that about?" he asked. Customer left his wallet. "And I returned it." Mark looked toward the customer, then back at Claire. "You should have told me first." Claire blinked. "Why?" "Because lost property goes through management." He was standing 10 feet away. Mark's jaw tightened. "That is not the point." Ethan watched Claire take a slow breath. "Then what is the point?" The diner seemed quieter for half a second. Mark lowered his voice. "The point is that you follow procedure." Claire glanced towards Sophie, then away. "I did the right thing. I decide what the right thing is while you are on my clock." Ethan stopped lifting his coffee. Claire's expression changed. Not anger. Something more controlled. "My clock." Mark looked toward the kitchen doors. "Do not start." Claire did not move. "I worked 9 hours Tuesday. We already discussed that. I was paid for 7. Mark's eyes sharpened. "Not here. I have the records." "Claire." His voice dropped lower. "You should be very careful about accusing management of things you do not understand." Ethan looked at the small notebook near the register. Claire followed his gaze for a fraction of a second, then quickly moved it beneath a stack of menus. Mark noticed. "What is that?" "Nothing. Let me see it." Claire placed her hand over the menus. "It is personal." Mark stepped closer to the counter. "If it involves this business, it is not personal." Sophie's small voice came from below. "Mom." Mark froze. Claire's face lost color. For 1 second, nobody spoke. Then Mark looked down behind the counter and saw the child wrapped in Claire's coat. His expression hardened immediately. "You brought her here?" Claire stepped between him and Sophie. "My sitter canceled. She is sick. I had no one else." "You know the policy." "I know. I also know I was scheduled tonight, and you said if I missed another shift you would cut my hours." Mark folded his arms. "So you hid a sick child under my counter?" "She is not bothering anyone. That is not your decision." Sophie pulled the coat tighter around herself. Claire lowered her voice. "Please. I have 1 hour left. Let me finish. I will clean everything before we leave." Mark looked at the soup bowl near Sophie, then at the register. "And you have been feeding her restaurant food too?" Claire reached into her apron and pulled out the receipts. "I paid for every bit of it." Mark took the receipts, barely looked at them, and dropped them onto the counter. "That is not the issue." Ethan leaned back slowly in booth 12. Until that moment, he had been collecting information. Missing hours, management behavior, policy violations, numbers. But now he understood something the reports had failed to show. The real problem was not that Northstar had rules. It was that people like Mark had learned to use those rules without mercy. Claire kept her voice steady. She needed somewhere warm. She needed food. "I paid for it. I did my job." Mark stared at her for a long moment. Then he said the words Ethan had been waiting to hear. "Take off your apron. Your shift is over." Claire did not argue. That surprised Ethan more than anger would have. She simply reached behind her neck, untied the apron, and folded it once over her hands. Am I fired? She asked. Mark glanced toward the dining room, aware now that 2 customers were watching. I said your shift is over. That is not what I asked. His face tightened. We will discuss your employment tomorrow. Claire nodded slowly. So I should not come in for breakfast shift? I will call you. Ethan had seen that kind of answer before. It sounded temporary. It usually meant someone wanted the power to make another person spend the night wondering whether they still had a paycheck. Claire slipped the folded apron onto the counter, then crouched beside Sophie. Come on, sweetheart. We are going home. Sophie looked at her with glassy, tired eyes. Did I get you in trouble? Claire's expression softened immediately. No, you did nothing wrong. But he got mad. Adults get mad for lots of reasons. That does not make it your fault. She helped Sophie into the coat, buttoning it carefully beneath her chin. Ethan looked toward the rain outside. It had grown heavier, drumming against the windows and turning the parking lot lights into blurred yellow circles. Claire checked her phone. The screen showed a bus arrival time nearly 30 minutes away. Sophie swayed slightly beside her, exhausted. Claire put one hand on her shoulder. We can wait by the door. Mark pointed toward the entrance. Not inside if you are off the clock. Claire stared at him. For the first time that night, Ethan saw something close to disbelief break through her composure. She has a fever. Then you should take her home. I am trying to. Claire, do not make this harder than it needs to be. Ethan felt something inside him shift. Not because Mark raised his voice. He did not. That was what made it worse. The cruelty was calm. Administrative. Easy. Claire swallowed whatever she wanted to say and reached for her purse. Then she paused. Her eyes moved to booth 12. Ethan still had half a bowl of soup in front of him. You should finish that before it gets cold, she said. He stared at her. She had just lost the rest of her shift. She did not know whether she still had a job. Her daughter needed medicine she could barely afford. And somehow, she was still worried about the meal she had bought for a man she believed had nowhere to go. Claire, Ethan said. She looked at him. He almost told her everything. His name, his company, the acquisition, the fact that one phone call could change the entire room. But he stopped. Not because he doubted her. Because he wanted to know one more thing. Whether her kindness disappeared when there was truly nothing left to gain. He stood slowly and reached into the pocket of his old coat. I can pay you back for the soup. Claire shook her head. Keep your money. You need it more than I do. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Do not do that. Do what? Decide what I need because of what you see. Ethan went still. Claire adjusted Sophie's hood. I gave you dinner because I wanted to. That does not make me helpless. The words landed cleanly. No self-pity. No performance. Just dignity. Ethan nodded. You are right. Mark gave an impatient sigh from behind the counter. Are we done here? Claire took Sophie's hand and started toward the door. Ethan watched them pass the register. Then he saw the small notebook still partly hidden beneath the menus. Claire saw it too. She stopped. Mark followed her gaze. Leave that. It belongs to me. It contains company information. Claire's shoulders stiffened. It contains my hours. And the hours of people who asked me to write them down. Mark reached for the notebook, but Claire picked it up first and held it against her chest. You should be careful, he said quietly. Careful about what? About making accusations you cannot prove. Ethan stepped away from booth 12. His voice was calm. What if she can prove them? Mark turned toward him, irritated. This is none of your business. Ethan looked at Claire's notebook, then at the time clock near the kitchen. Maybe not. He took one step closer. But I am curious. What happens if the owner of this company sees what happened here tonight? Mark gave a short laugh. The owner? He looked Ethan up and down, taking in the worn coat and scuffed shoes. The owner would thank me for enforcing policy. Claire looked between them. Ethan's expression did not change. Would he? Absolutely. Mark folded his arms. People like you do not understand how businesses work. Ethan reached into his coat and pulled out the cheap prepaid phone he had carried all evening. Maybe you are right. He pressed one number and waited. Someone answered immediately. Ethan kept his eyes on Mark. Rachel, he said. Bring the acquisition team inside. For the first time that night, Mark did not have an answer. The name Rachel seemed to mean nothing to him, but the way Ethan said it changed the air around the counter. Claire stopped near the door with Sophie pressed against her side. Outside, headlights swept across the rain-dark parking lot. One black sport utility vehicle turned in. Then another. Then a third. Mark looked through the front windows and gave a nervous laugh. What is this? Ethan slipped the prepaid phone back into his coat. You said people like me do not understand how businesses work. His voice remained quiet. I thought I should bring in some people who do. The first vehicle stopped beneath the diner sign. A woman in a charcoal coat stepped out beneath an umbrella, followed by two men carrying leather portfolios. Another group emerged from the second vehicle. They moved quickly through the rain, not like customers searching for dinner, but like people arriving for a meeting that had already begun without them. Claire watched the front door open. The woman entered first, lowered her umbrella, and scanned the diner until she found Ethan. Her entire expression shifted. Mr. Cole. Mark's face went still. Claire looked at Ethan, then at the woman. Cole. Ethan removed the knit cap from his head. Without the hunched posture he had maintained most of the evening, something about him seemed different. Not richer, more certain. The woman approached. Rachel Moore, Executive Operations, she said, then turned to the others. Legal, finance, and acquisitions are here. Mark stared at them. Acquisitions? Rachel looked toward Ethan. The North Star team is available by conference call whenever you are ready. Claire's fingers tightened around Sophie's hand. Ethan saw confusion moving across her face as pieces connected. The old coat. The questions about management. The receipt. The time records. He wished the truth felt less like deception in that moment. But there was no gentle way to explain why a billionaire had spent an evening pretending he could not afford dinner. Mark finally found his voice. Who exactly are you? Ethan looked at him. Ethan Cole. The color drained from Mark's face. Rachel placed a folder on the counter. The Cole Hospitality Group logo was embossed across the front. Mr. Cole is the founder and chief executive officer of the company currently evaluating North Star Diners for acquisition. Silence settled over the room. Even the customers who had been pretending not to listen stopped pretending. Mark glanced from the folder to Ethan's worn coat. This is some kind of test. No, Ethan said. A test implies I created the conditions. I did not create what happened here tonight. Mark straightened quickly. Then you understand I was enforcing company policy. I understand what you said. Ethan looked toward the time clock near the kitchen. I also understand Claire says 9 hours became 7 on Tuesday. Mark's eyes moved toward her notebook. She is confused. Claire spoke before Ethan could. I am not confused. Her voice was quiet, but it carried farther than Mark's had all evening. She opened the notebook. Tuesday, I clocked in at 12:58 in the afternoon and left at 10:14 at night. My payroll record shows 7 hours and 12 minutes. Rachel immediately opened her tablet. Do you have other dates? Claire hesitated. Mark cut in. This is inappropriate. Employees cannot just make claims in front of customers. Ethan turned toward him. Then let us remove the audience from the equation. Rachel, secure the timekeeping records before anything can be changed. Rachel nodded. Already requested. Mark looked stunned. You cannot access those without corporate approval. We have corporate approval, Rachel said. North Star signed the due diligence access agreement 6 days ago. Ethan watched Mark absorb that. The power in the room had changed completely, but Ethan did not enjoy it. That was not why he had come. He looked toward Claire. She was still holding Sophie's hand, still standing in the same worn shoes, still unsure whether she had a job tomorrow. Claire, he said gently, I owe you an apology. She looked at him. For what? For letting you believe I needed your money. Claire's eyes dropped briefly to the unfinished soup. You did. Ethan frowned. I did not. Not for the food. She looked back at him. For the reminder. Ethan had no response to that. Sophie leaned against her mother's coat and whispered, Mom, I am tired. Claire immediately turned toward her. I know, sweetheart. Ethan saw the pharmacy message in his mind again. $42.18. He reached for his wallet, then stopped himself before touching it. Claire had already told him what dignity looked like. He would not turn her into a charity case now. Rachel, he said, is the company medical transport service still available tonight? Yes. Claire shook her head at once. We do not need a limousine. It is not a limousine, Ethan said. It is a regular car service we use for employees during late hours. She studied him cautiously. I am not your employee. Ethan glanced toward the folder on the counter. Not yet. Mark looked up sharply. Claire did too. Ethan continued before either could misunderstand. I mean, North Star may become part of Cole Hospitality. Nothing more. Claire's shoulders relaxed slightly. I can take the bus. Ethan looked outside at the heavy rain, then at Sophie. You can. But you should not have to tonight. Claire was silent. Rachel spoke softly. The driver can stop at the pharmacy on the way home. No charge. No obligation. Sophie tugged at Claire's sleeve. Mommy, please. Claire closed her eyes for 1 second, then nodded. All right. Ethan stepped aside as Rachel arranged the ride. Claire gathered her purse and notebook. Before reaching the door, she turned back. What happens to him? She met Mark. Ethan looked at the manager, then back at her. Nothing tonight without facts. Claire seemed surprised. You are not firing him. Not because I am angry. Ethan glanced at the notebook in her hand. If the records prove what you documented, then decisions will be made for reasons that can survive daylight. Claire studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. It was not gratitude. It was something Ethan valued more. Respect beginning cautiously. The driver opened the door outside. Claire guided Sophie toward the waiting car. Ethan watched them disappear into the rain, then turned back toward Rachel. Freeze the acquisition. Rachel's eyebrows lifted. Completely. Until the labor audit is finished. Mark stared at him. You would risk a deal this size over one waitress? Ethan looked at the empty spot beneath the counter where Sophie had been hiding. No. His voice was almost a whisper. I would risk it because one waitress showed me what the numbers were hiding. By 9 the next morning, Claire had slept less than 4 hours. Sophie's fever had finally broken after the medicine, and for the first time in 2 days, the apartment felt quiet. Claire stood at the small kitchen counter in socks, holding a mug of coffee she had reheated twice, when her phone rang. She almost ignored it. Unknown numbers rarely brought good news. Claire Bennett, a woman asked when she answered. Yes. This is Rachel Moore from Cole Hospitality Group. I am sorry to call early. Mr. Cole asked whether you would be willing to meet with our labor review team today. Claire looked toward the couch, where Sophie slept beneath a faded yellow blanket. Am I being investigated? Rachel paused. No. We are investigating what happened to you. Claire did not know whether that made her feel better. By noon, Linda Harper had agreed to watch Sophie for a few hours, and Claire found herself standing inside Cole Hospitality headquarters wearing the same simple blouse she used for parent meetings at school. The lobby was all glass, stone, and quiet confidence. Nothing looked accidental. Nothing looked cheap. Claire felt the familiar instinct to shrink herself, then remembered Ethan sitting in a worn coat at booth 12 and forced her shoulders back. Rachel met her near security. Thank you for coming. I almost did not. I understand. Rachel did not try to persuade her otherwise. That helped. Upstairs, 3 people waited in a conference room with printed payroll records, schedules, and copies of Claire's notes. Ethan was there too, but he was not wearing the expensive suit Claire expected. Dark slacks, white shirt, no tie. Somehow that made him look more like the man from the diner, which was both easier and harder. He stood when she entered. How is Sophie? Better. Good. Claire sat across from him. You said this was about the records. Ethan nodded. It is. One of the auditors slid a document toward her. We found discrepancies in 12 employee time records from your location over the last 3 months. Claire looked down. Her own name was there. So was Linda's. So were people who had complained quietly and then stopped because they needed the job. How much? She asked. We are still calculating, the auditors said, but enough to require a full review. Claire felt anger rise, but it was not loud. It was heavy. They told us we were remembering wrong. Ethan's expression tightened. That is why the acquisition is frozen. Claire looked up. You really stopped the whole deal? Yes. Because of one diner? Because I do not know yet whether it is one diner. He leaned forward slightly. And because if the numbers are wrong at the bottom, I do not trust the numbers at the top. Claire studied him. There was no performance in his voice. No attempt to sound heroic. Just control. What happens now? She asked. We verify everything. People are paid what they are owed. Management decisions follow the facts. Claire glanced at the paperwork. And then you buy North Star anyway? Ethan did not answer immediately. Only if I believe it can be fixed. Claire gave a tired laugh. Companies always say they can be fixed. Then tell me what that would actually mean. She looked at him. What? Not what sounds good in a press release. What would actually help people like you? The question caught her off guard. Claire had expected an apology. Maybe compensation. She had not expected to be asked. Start with meals, she said slowly. You throw away food every night, but employees can get written up for taking it. Ethan glanced toward Rachel, who began writing. Claire continued. Childcare. Not free childcare. Just emergency help when a sitter cancels. Sick leave people can actually use without feeling like they are volunteering to lose their shifts. And time records employees can see before payroll closes. Ethan nodded once. What else? Claire looked at him. Managers who remember that policies are supposed to protect a business, not punish people for being poor. Silence filled the room. Ethan did not write that one down. He simply absorbed it. Would you help us design this? He asked. Claire frowned. As what? A paid consultant for the employee side of the review. Her first instinct was suspicion. You barely know me. I know you returned a wallet full of cash when you needed $42 for medicine. I know you documented missing hours when doing that could cost you your job. And I know you bought dinner for someone you believed had less than you. Claire looked down at her hands. That does not make me qualified for corporate work. No, Ethan said. But knowing what broken systems feel like from the inside might. Claire looked at him again. For the first time, she did not see the homeless man or the billionaire. She saw someone asking instead of deciding. I will think about it, she said. Ethan nodded. That is all I am asking. Rachel's phone buzzed on the table. She checked the message, and her expression changed. Ethan. He turned toward her. What is it? Rachel looked at Claire, then back at him. The audit team found the same time adjustments at 6 more North Star locations. Claire felt the room change before anyone said another word. 6 more locations meant the problem was no longer one manager making bad decisions in one diner. It meant a pattern. Rachel turned her tablet toward Ethan, showing rows of time adjustments, employee names, and repeated deductions that looked too similar to be coincidence. Ethan read in silence. His face did not harden so much as become still. Claire had learned the difference. At the diner, anger had flickered through him when Mark dismissed her. Here, there was something colder and more deliberate. How far back? Ethan asked. At least 9 months, Rachel said. Possibly longer. Who approved the labor reporting system? North Star Corporate Operations. Claire looked from one face to another. So Mark was not doing this alone. Rachel answered carefully. We do not know that yet, but we know the same method appears elsewhere. Ethan stood and walked to the window. Chicago stretched beneath him, bright and orderly from 47 floors up. Claire wondered how many lives could look simple from that height. After a moment, he turned back. Call Northstar's chief operating officer. Tell him the acquisition review is suspended pending a full labor audit. No changes to payroll systems. No deletions. No schedule edits without preservation. Rachel nodded. I will handle it. Claire watched everyone move quickly, and for the first time she understood what Ethan's power actually looked like. It was not the black vehicles or the glass building. It was the fact that one quiet sentence from him could stop millions of dollars from moving. That kind of power frightened her a little. Maybe because she had spent most of her life around people who had almost none. Ethan returned to the table. You can go home, he said. You have already done more than enough. Claire looked at the documents. No. He paused. No. If this happened at 6 more locations, then there are people who probably think they imagined it too. She pulled the notebook from her bag and opened to the back pages. Linda gave me 2 names from another store. One of them transferred after complaining about missing hours. Rachel stopped typing. Do you have contact information? Not all of it, but I can get some. Ethan sat again. Claire, I do not want you putting your job at risk. She gave him a small, humorless smile. I'm not sure I still have a job. You do. The answer came too fast. Claire looked at him. Ethan corrected himself. Your employment cannot be terminated because you reported payroll concerns. Legal will make sure of that. That is not the same thing. No. He nodded. It is not. She studied him for a moment. You asked what would actually help people like me. I did. Then do not just fix the money. Ethan leaned back slightly. What else? Claire closed the notebook. Fix the fear. The room went quiet. People do not report things because they think nobody will believe them. Or because even if somebody does, they still need next week's schedule. Ethan said nothing. Claire continued. If you really buy this company, make it possible for an employee to speak without having to choose between being honest and feeding their kid. Rachel slowly lowered her tablet. Ethan looked at Claire as if the sentence had changed the shape of the entire problem. Would you say that again in the meeting this afternoon? He asked. Claire frowned. What meeting? Northstar's executive team is coming here. You want me in a room with them? Only if you are comfortable. Claire imagined tailored suits, polished language, people who could explain away missing hours with phrases like operational variance. Her stomach tightened. Then she thought of Sophie beneath the counter whispering that she was not hungry. I will come. At 3 o'clock, 12 executives sat around the long conference table. Claire took the chair nearest the door. Ethan sat at the head, but he did not begin with financial projections. He placed Claire's small notebook in the center of the table. This, he said, is why we are here. One executive shifted uncomfortably. With respect, Ethan, anecdotal complaints should not derail a transaction of this scale. Ethan looked at him. They are not anecdotal anymore. Rachel displayed the audit findings on the wall screen. The room became quieter with each location added. Then Ethan turned toward Claire. Tell them what you told me. Claire felt every eye move to her. Her hands went cold, but her voice did not. People can survive bad shifts. They can survive rude customers. They can survive being tired. She looked around the table. What they cannot survive forever is believing the truth will cost them their paycheck. No one interrupted. Claire took one breath. If you want better employees, stop making good employees afraid to speak. The Northstar chief operating officer opened his mouth, but Ethan raised one hand. Not dramatically, just enough. We are not buying Northstar under the current terms, he said. Several faces changed at once. The deal is suspended until every affected employee is repaid. The timekeeping system is independently reviewed, and a protected reporting process is installed. One executive stared at him. You are willing to walk away? Ethan glanced toward Claire's notebook. If this company can only look profitable when workers are afraid to tell the truth, then there is nothing here worth buying. 3 months later, the same Harper Street diner looked almost unchanged from the sidewalk. The red sign still buzzed faintly above the windows. The chrome stools still reflected the morning light. The coffee still smelled stronger near the kitchen than anywhere else in the room. But Claire noticed the differences the moment she walked through the door. A new notice beside the time clock explained that every employee could review and challenge recorded hours before payroll closed. Another sign listed emergency child care assistance and paid sick leave in plain language, not buried in a handbook nobody had time to read. Employees received 1 free meal during every shift. The food that could safely be donated at closing now went to a neighborhood shelter instead of the trash. The audit had taken weeks. More than 100 employees across Northstar locations had received back pay. Several managers had been removed after the review confirmed repeated timekeeping violations. Mark Dalton was no longer at Harper Street. Ethan never told Claire the details of what happened to him, only that every decision had been based on verified records, exactly as he promised. Cole Hospitality eventually completed the acquisition, but under terms North Star executives had once called impossible. Ethan called them necessary. Claire had accepted the paid consulting role for the employee review, telling herself it would last only a few weeks. Then Rachel offered her a permanent position as employee advocacy coordinator. Claire almost laughed when she first heard the title. I waited tables 3 months ago, she had said. You still know more about what employees are afraid to say than most people in this building, Rachel replied. Cole Hospitality paid for training, and Claire accepted only after making sure the job came with clear responsibilities instead of sympathy. She did not want to be someone's inspirational story. She wanted to be useful. Now, wearing a simple navy sweater and carrying a folder from her first regional employee meeting, Claire stepped into the diner with Sophie beside her. Sophie had been healthy for weeks. She raced toward Linda, who came out from the kitchen laughing and wrapped her in a warm hug. Look at you, Linda said. No fever, no hiding, and no stealing your mother's dinner rolls. Sophie smiled. Mom says they are free now. 1 per shift, Claire corrected. We are not bankrupting the company with bread. A familiar voice came from booth 12. I think we can survive a second roll. Claire turned. Ethan sat in the same booth where she had first seen him, but there was no old coat, no knit cap, and no careful disguise. He was dressed more simply than she expected, in a charcoal sweater with the sleeves pushed slightly back and a cup of coffee in front of him. Across the table sat 2 bowls of soup. Claire walked over slowly. You can afford your own dinner now. Ethan looked at the soup, then at her. I could afford it then. Claire folded her arms. That makes what you did even stranger. I have been told that. By me. Mostly by you. Sophie climbed into the booth across from him. Is that for us? Ethan nodded toward the second bowl. I remembered you liked the chicken soup. Claire sat beside her daughter. For a moment, none of them said much. The diner filled the silence for them. Plates clinked. Coffee poured. Someone laughed near the register. Ordinary sounds. The kind Ethan once would have ignored while studying revenue reports. Claire looked around. You really changed a lot. We changed a lot. You own the company. That does not mean I knew what needed fixing. Claire glanced at him. You could have just written a check that night. I almost did. I know. Ethan looked surprised. Claire smiled faintly. You reached for your wallet about 3 times. You noticed? Waitresses notice everything. Ethan laughed softly, then grew quiet. You stopped me from making the easiest mistake. Which was, thinking money was the same as help. Claire looked down at the soup. Steam curled upward between them. Ethan continued. I spent years learning the price of things. Labor, property, companies, risk. His eyes moved toward Sophie, then back to Claire. That night, you spent $7.40 on a stranger when you needed every dollar yourself. Claire shook her head. It was soup. No. Ethan's voice softened. It was proof. Of what? He looked around the diner, at the new notices, the employees eating during their breaks, the time clock nobody had to fear anymore. That kindness costs the most when you have the least to spare. Claire did not answer immediately. Sophie tore a dinner roll in half and placed 1 piece beside Ethan's bowl. Now you have to share 2. Ethan accepted it with complete seriousness. Fair enough. Claire smiled, and for the first time since that rainy night, the distance between the billionaire and the waitress felt less important than the table between them. Ethan had entered Harper Street looking for the truth about a company. What he found was something no balance sheet could measure. A woman with almost nothing left who still believed someone else deserved to eat.